Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest webinar, and thanks for joining us today. So I'm really pleased to welcome Steve Reed to the session today. Steve Reed is the National Director of the National Management Centre up in the Northwest, and we're going to be talking about the NMC today and how it's its role in protecting the cyber estate. So let's get straight into the session and get going. So Steve, what is the NMC and how was it all brought together?
Brilliant. Thanks, David, for the introduction. Yeah, just to introduce myself, Stephen Reed, NMC Director. Been in the industry for now for around about 10 years. And one thing that it does bring about is the people's passion in and around cyber. So really grateful for the opportunity to come over and speak today. So the NMC. So the NMC is brought about to support the mitigation of cyber risk to national policing. That's what it is at a headline level. The reason we're here, we are part of Police Digital Services, and the NMC was born of a programme who many will know as the NEP, or the National Enabling Programme. And that was there to introduce kind of three pillars, if you like, to national policing, one of which was identity access management. The other was about to bringing about an efficiency productivity suite of technology and tooling that policing then can then use to make their job more effective. Essentially, the people at the front line, how do they use technology to be more effective in their role? But the problem is with doing that brings about a different kind of risk, and it introduces that cyber risk. And that's the whole point of the NMC, was to work alongside the two first pillars to try and then mitigate that different kind of risk. So of course, by supporting forces to that kind of journey to the cloud, I'll call it, and being able to trust technology, being able to trust what they've got at the fingertips, to be able to store, transmit and access data, that risk of cyber threat can increase. So we need to be able to mitigate that risk by identifying the threat, protecting against it, detecting the threat, and responding to any kind of malicious activity in a rapid and effective way. And essentially that's what the NMC was there to do.
That's really important that we get that basis, and it is part of a wider part of work that's been done. So what in general terms is the threat or risk potential on our cyber estate at the moment, Steve?
Yeah, it's ever evolving, it's ever changing. As we evolve with technology, the actual threat will change and evolve with that. I guess what we've got from a policing perspective, policing holds some of the most sensitive data around, from evidential investigative files, names and addresses of victims of crime, to locations and details of covert operations. You know, there's a lot of people out there that would love to get their hands on that kind of data for their own game. Talking about organised crime gangs, threat actors, and maybe even some state-sponsored threat actors as well, would love to have that information. But then there's also different elements as well. There's people out there who would love to disrupt, and their main aim is to disrupt. Believe it or not everybody likes the police, and they just want to make sure that they're seen or heard. So in particular, they like to disrupt police operations. They'll certainly look to cause reputational damage to the UK government. And of course, policing is not there without the trust and the backing of the public. So when that kind of stuff happens, that trust from the public diminishes. And then, of course, I don't think I can be here without talking about the heightened sensitivity in relation to Russia and Ukraine. And that kind of dynamic is ever evolving for potential activity from those threat actors. Innovation of certainly new malwares that we've been seeing during the conflict, certainly new tactics and techniques, and against targets and organisations from against all nations that are even involved in the conflict. So all of those different threats are out there.
I think you made a really important point there about the public's information. You know, the public, I say this quite regularly when I'm talking to people in this space. The public trusts us with some of the most sensitive and personal information they could possibly ever have. And they trust us to give it to us so that we can do something about it, tackle the crime, bring offenders to justice, or protect them from harm. And without that information, we just can't do our jobs. So it is absolutely critical that the information that we are getting from the public, we keep safe, we share appropriately, but protect to ensure it's secure. Steve, there's quite a lot in that. So can you tell us a little bit more about the operating model and the services the NMC provides to forces, and how that sort of works together across policing?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're seeing on the screen there is where we were just 2 years ago. That's essentially when the COVID pandemic hit, which was another one of our challenges. And a few years ago, like any organisation, really, we started out with a vision, and that's all we had. We had very little else. And our vision was to create that centralised cybersecurity capability to defend as one, and have a holistic view of threats across all of policing from a cyber perspective. It's global. It's not, it's not a local issue that one police force or one organisation can resolve by themselves. We need to work together on this, and it's very much a global issue. So we set about trying to build that capability and work on the defenders one approach, but also that greater holistic view actually gives us more of a knowledge and more of an understanding of how to actually respond to the threats that are out there, both from a proactive and a reactive way. But as of today, where are we kind of in 2022? We now have a facility up in the northwest with around about 60 cybersecurity professionals, all doing all very unique skills, but they're all working together in that one facility. We're talking analysts who monitor networks 24/7. We're talking about incident responders that are there to help police forces respond to that threat. And then we go straight into the more technical threat hunters and the threat intelligence specialists, where we're developing those relationships with the National Crime Agency, the National Cyber Security Centre, and the Home Office, the Cabinet Office. We're building those relationships to make sure the government is kind of leading the way with that defenders one approach, and the NMC is really at the heart of that. You wanted me to talk about the services as well. So we do have a number of services. I prefer to call them probably capabilities, because that's exactly what they are. It's a capability of the NMC that the policing can use and lean on. And these take us through the number of stages, really. I mentioned identifying the threat, protecting the threat, and detecting the threat, and that's what we've built these services around. We've built it against the risk and the cyber risk, so we've kept that at the forefront of our mind when we start to build and deliver the services. And then, of course, we then go and find the technology to enhance those services and deliver them. I think it's probably important to note that from those people who are listening to this from an operational background will understand that each of these are a very unique set of skills, requires a very unique experience and a unique knowledge base, but actually they work quite cohesively, and it's really important that they all work together. A protective monitoring alert could then kick off an incident response, who could then bring in threat intelligence, and we could then do a threat hunt based on the information we learn. So all of that needs to work together, and if we find any of these capabilities working in silo, that can actually seriously weaken the response to that threat. So we've built it quite a cohesive team. It's a big team. We've put it all under one roof. We do have things like war rooms that people can break out into. It's not all just an operational function. We are 24/7. So we were working Christmas Day, Boxing Day throughout incidents like Log4j, which many organisations were working through at that point. But yeah, I suppose that's kind of the setup. We have those skills, the knowledge base. We've recruited the people. We're now delivering the service. I guess now it's just building that partnership with police forces and wider government, really.
You mentioned partnership a second ago, and in many ways it's a partnership between policing, the NMC, and the wider cyber security infrastructure in the UK, because at the end of the day we're all separate pieces of infrastructure. The public does, we've got very few national systems, the NEP being one of them. How does it all work together, and would you describe the NMC as an extension of the force's own cyber security team?
Absolutely, yeah, you're spot on, David. So it is that partnership, very much so. We can't do this alone, the same as which police forces can't do it on their own either. It's very much that national partnership and commitment of information sharing to actually be effective. At the minute, it is really working well, and I do thank the forces that have engaged with the NMC. The sharing of information, the fact they'll ring us if they're seeing something and something's going on, we can then share that with other police forces. It's exactly how we meant this to work, by having a centrally coordinated capability. Just to give an example, really, we've been able to work with local police forces to identify simple things like a phishing campaign, or even finding malicious domains such as posing as policing on the internet, which is what attackers are now doing at the moment, certainly during COVID. And whilst we're being able to support those forces, we're able to bring down those domains, we're able to work with other law enforcement and being able to block those emails for those impacted. What we're able to do then as a central capability is take that information and share it wider. We're able to go out to all the other forces, tell them what they need to do to try and mitigate the potential threat. But also that information has, in circumstances, gone out wider across the general public. You know, we work quite closely with our cyber resilience centres to share what we're seeing, the wealth of knowledge that we're getting across the forces to actually start protecting the general public. We are able to send out intelligence throughout other UK organisations. And just watched to see it being on screen there. Hopefully a lot of people listening to this have actually read the National Cybersecurity Strategy, which again, it has that theme that I took out of it of defending as one. I think gone are the days now where we try and hide a breach or we try and hide an attack. It can happen to anybody, and it has happened to anybody. So we really need to get better as a country, as humanity, to actually share that information and be open about it and say, yeah, do you know what, something's happened to me, but to stop it happening to anybody else, we're able to share that information and get that out there to ultimately protect cyberspace. And just some of the stats there, I actually took some notes of some of the stats from the NCSC. We've got, of the 39% of UK businesses who identified an attack, the most common threat vector was phishing attempts of 83%. And of that 39%, around 1 in 5 identified a more sophisticated attack type, such as DDoS, denial of service, malware or ransomware attack, which is certainly on the increase at the moment and probably one of our biggest threats. And within that
certainly,
group of,
Steve, on that, those are the stats for UK business, but police is not immune from this, and sometimes we're not even being targeted as the police. We're just a web portal or a site that people are looking to target.
So this is the thing now. We're more connected than we ever were. We've got the internet. We have a lot of sharing platforms and software providers that we all use. And you're absolutely right. Policing's no different to another organisation, and we have to look at the same threat and the risk to policing the same as what every other organisation needs to do. So we don't count ourselves as any different really to the others, and we need to do exactly the same. And I suppose the other thing about policing is public money. The cost of a cyber attack, is exponential, really, from what it can actually cost. You've got the GDPR rules that are in place, and rightly so. But actually, the average estimated cost of a cyber attack in the last 12 months is nearly £5,000. But if that includes small enterprises, if we only talk about medium and large businesses, the figure rises to £20,000. And then on top of that, you have to then talk about the reputational damage to the organisation. How much is that actually going to cost, and how does that impact future business from that organisation?
But cyber security isn't just the responsibility of the technicians and the NMC. Everybody in the force, everybody in the organisation has a role to play, and we all undergo training quite regularly for our roles. And it's clear that we've all got work to do, but what should we all look out for as part of our day-to-day business and possibly even our home lives?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it is everybody's responsibility. Cyber sounds quite complex, and a lot of people think, the IT team will sort that out, or the security team have me protected. But actually, some of the most costly cyber attacks actually start with those quite simple emails, or even a text now, smishings going around. Or even calls. A lot of people will have family members getting scams at the moment. So these attackers rely on people to let them in. You can have all the technology controls in the world in place, but actually if there's somebody that lets an attacker walk in through the door into their organisation and plug a USB stick in, or if they're clicking on a link that's got through, or they're opening up a malicious attachment, it's everybody's responsibility really to try and report that. And it's always better to be safe than sorry. If there's, just make sure that with the emails that you're receiving, you're expecting it's from somebody who you expect that email from. It's got an attachment who you expect. It's got Some of these emails are really good. Certainly the ones during the COVID pandemic, the attackers exploited that, and they made very, very good emails all regarding COVID and COVID testing. So I think it's always better to be safe than sorry. And I think from a police force perspective, your forces will have contacts in cyber, you'll have IT departments, security departments. So please do raise it with those departments who have direct links into the NMC.
And it's been made a lot easier for users, hasn't it? There's the report phishing button that's on your Outlook now, isn't there, that goes straight through to the right team in force, who can then decide to escalate it.
Exactly. So yeah, so if you've not seen that, then definitely you'll see it on when you open up an email. It's a simple click of a button to report it, and that will go off exactly to the right departments. So exactly that is, it's better to be safe than sorry, definitely, on these emails. Send them off, and then they'll get in touch with the NMC, where we can do a bit more. So one of the services was malware analysis. We can start looking at that email. But the whole point of the NMC is to then utilise that content and that information that we've received on that campaign to then share it wider to protect other police forces. So and then the UK government. So if you think about it, just by reporting that one email could actually prevent a full-scale national cyber incident. So please do it, is my ask, really.
So one of the things is that it's important that most people who work in policing will never have contact directly with members of the NMC, but they have a way of escalating and getting the support and knowing you're there to help protect them. So if you're worried about cybersecurity or there's an incident coming in, what's your approach in force to be able to get help or support from you guys?
Yeah, so you're right. So actually we kind of, the people on the front line and the people within policing, they all have jobs to do. So whilst it's everybody's responsibility, we need to make it easy for everybody to actually report these incidents. And that means not having to pick up the phone, spend time speaking to us to talk about and go through the investigation. It needs to be really effective. So utilising things like the phishing button will go through and contacting people within force. So your IT department, there's the IT help desks as the starting point. Forces will, there's a different makeup in every force, but they will have security teams or cyber teams who will have contact with the NMC. So it's just a simple go straight into those departments within force, hand it over, and then they can then liaise with the NMC, and we will do kind of the grunt work for that, so they can get back to kind of doing what they do best, and that's protecting the public.
And of course, if anybody else is perhaps not in the 43 forces and wants to know more about how they can work with the Police Digital Service and the National Management Centre, if you head over to the PDS website, pds.police.uk website, there's a contact form there that'll come into the right team, and then we can get your inquiry dealt with and get you involved in what we're doing. So please do get in touch with us as soon as you can do through the police website, pds.police.uk website, and we can pick up that. Steve, I'm just going to add one more question, if I could. What more should we be doing on a daily basis? Can we take some of the learning from work into home as well?
Absolutely, and this is the thing about cyber. It's not just a business approach; it's your personal lives. I talked about scam phone calls. I talked about the emails. I get the smishing text just the same as everybody else that comes through. And I think the one thing is really just education. There's a lot of people, these scams are getting better and better. The phishing emails are looking a lot better. And I think, have a look online. There's loads of guidance from the NCSC about how to spot phishing emails. From a police force perspective, we can send out some education pieces, work with the cyber resilience centres, but use that information in your home life. Speak to your own family members, certainly the elderly family members. These are the kind of victims that they'll prey on to try and extort. So please use that and educate. That's all I can say, really, is education.
Yeah, and just don't assume that it's been taken care of by your software. Don't assume that security is good. We should all be suspicious by default to act and protect the infrastructure. Steve, that's been brilliant. Thank you so much for that. The information is at the heart of every police decision we make every day by every team 24/7. So being able to share and collaborate on the information we need to in order to keep the community safe, target offenders and protect those who are vulnerable from harm is absolutely critical. But as I mentioned before, the public do put huge trust in police forces to protect that really sensitive personal information. They're sharing it with us for a purpose, it's often at a time of personal crisis, on the understanding that we'll keep it safe. So it is absolutely critical that we all play our part. We work as across the board to do that. So, you know, without that trust, we simply can't do that. And the role of the NMC are working alongside your force colleagues is absolutely critical. I think we've answered most of the questions as they've come in. So, but before I draw the session to a close on this section, Steve, your team are shaping the future of the cybersecurity provision across policing, and we are encouraging lots of stakeholders to get in touch. What sort of thing are you thinking about for the future as we continue on?
Yeah, definitely. So the NMC is now part of Police Digital Service under Cyber Services. So we've kind of moved from that delivery phase into Cyber Services. So I now report direct into the National CISO. And what the kind of things we're looking at now is how does the NMC support from a risk compliance assurance point of view? Every force has to go through it, and rightly so, but actually it's quite hard graft to go through and fill out all the forms. We totally get that. So how can the NMC actually help shape that for the future? And that's how we can try and impact policing. But then we also need to stay one step ahead of the game in terms of technology and those attack vectors. So we are working with our partners in NCSC, NCA to look at the trends. Our threat intelligence team are fantastic at looking at trending and where we think we're going to go into the next year. So what we're looking to do now is, okay, we've set up a baseline of NMC. We know what we wanted to do then, but where do we want to be in the next 2, 3, 5 years? Now, in the cyber world, 5 years, you know, is a long way out and everything can change, but we need to start planning and what do we think the next level threat is and try and get ahead of the game. So we are using innovation to try and do that.
Steve, so if you've already got a relationship with the NMC through your force liaison officer, reach out to them if you know who they are. We're not going to share their details on because they're the people who are working on the very specific and local detail. But if you've got any further inquiries or questions about the NMC and the PDS cyber offer, please get in touch with the business engagement team through the website. There's a simple form you can fill in there and we can follow that up, and we're doing really well at following those through very quickly at the moment. So, drawing that section to a close, thanks Steve and the NMC team. The site is an amazing site. I do visit it every now and again to work from there. Next week we're going to be bringing in some colleagues from Microsoft to revisit one of the key uses of forces using the modern cloud technology, and particularly around the Microsoft 365 space, where they'll be updating on their approach around cloud tasking and how they work using Microsoft lists. We used to talk a lot about Microsoft Planner as being a really powerful tool in terms of using it for tasking and intelligence, but things have moved on as we knew they would, and Microsoft List means it's actually easier and potentially a lot more functionality can be used at the heart of that. So we're going to bring in Chris from Microsoft next week where we can actually demonstrate that, and we're going to follow that up with a really detailed workshop where forces can pick up on that. And that brings me on to remind you about the PDS Enabling Centre and Solutions Catalogue. We'll post the link in the chat and put it on the screen. If you are a UK force, you can have access to this. It's an extranet, effectively, where you can access all the details about how to use 365, the cloud technologies, the Solutions Catalogue is in there. You can request access to that, and we're really keen to ensure you're sharing. But please share this sort of content with colleagues in force. The recording of this session will be available on the website. The link has been posted, and I'll pop it on the screen for the recording. You can replay these webinars on demand, share them with colleagues, so you can get more and more into it. So thank you so much for joining us. We're just coming up to the 1:30 hour. We are back next week, and we've got another one following that shortly after as well. But as we approach the Police Digital Summit, which is actually, I'm told, now sold out. We're not taking any live registrations anymore because we've got well over 300 people attending the Police Digital Summit in a couple of weeks' time, so in the middle of May. So we really look forward to continuing the engagement. Please keep coming back to our webinars as regularly as possible, and let's see what next steps we can do in terms of moving forward and delivering on the police digital strategy. Thanks so much for joining us.